So again, this was our Mealy machine, right? Mealy machine has the output on the transitions. You've got my goofy mnemonic, right? So a mealy kind of sounds like mean in the middle. So we think that the output is when you're in the middle between states on the transitions, whereas Moore machines have more output, right? They have more output. And so the output is on the states. The output happens when you get to a state rather than in between on the transitions. So let's make a new Moore machine. So here's our new Moore machine, and let's bring it down so you can see it. So I'm going to do a machine that is pretty much the same as our Mealy machine. Remember our Mealy machine, when it saw 1 output 0, when it saw 0 output 2 for no apparent reason, right? The only catch is when we make a Moore machine, as soon as it starts, on a start node, you have to have an output for each node, right? So just for fun, I think I'm going to have an exclamation point when we start. And let me just make this my initial node again. We don't have any final node options on our Moore machine because Moore machines are essentially the same as a Mealy machine in terms of the differences between Moore machine and a finite automaton, right? And again, this is a page from the JFLAP tutorial that just talks about the differences. So I want it to, what did my other one do? It had a 0 output when it saw 1 and a 2 output when it saw a 0. So let's have 2 more states, and we'll have a state that outputs 0. And you can see every time I make a state, it asks me to set the output. So there's a state, and we'll have 1 more state that outputs a 2, right? Yeah. So here's another state, and we will output a 2 from this state. So let's do some transitions. So if I see a 1, I want to go to the state that outputs a 0. And if I see a 0, I want to go to the state that outputs a 2. And then let's just, if I'm already here at this state and I see another one, so I just clicked so I could make a loop, I stay here. But if I'm at this state and I see a 0, I want to go down to Q2. And if I'm at Q2 and I see a 0, I want to stay here. Oops, no. Let's switch to the, there we go, so that we can see my loop a little bit better. And if I'm at Q2 and I see a 1, I want to go back to Q1 so that I can print that 0. All right. So here's my Moore machine, and now as soon as it starts every time, it's going to print that exclamation point, and then it'll print the rest of my output. So for example, if we go to the input, and I'm just going to go straight to the multiple run since you know how test works these days. Sorry, how the step works, I think. And if I take these and I run my inputs, every time now I get this exclamation point at the beginning, right? And then all the 1s turn to 0s, the 0s turn to 2s, and so on, right? There's also the same highlight nondeterminism in here as there is in Mealy machines. And you know, if I add, let's add another state. Oops, let's close out of the multiple run back in the editor. Let's add another transition from state Q0 to Q2 on 1. And if I try and run this now on multiple run, it will complain and say you've got to remove the non-deterministic states, right? So we can, well, we can test highlight non-determinism. Look, that's the one with a non-deterministic state. And if we click on the get rid of stuff and we get rid of that 1, then we can run it again. Awesome.